All right, this is your boy D back with another video on You Can Be Free. I got a special testimony tonight. I've for any of you who have seen the last video, I just recently interviewed my last well, I'm not gonna say my last, but on my last video, I interviewed a guy called Pastor Tom. He's a deliverance minister. One of my mentors that was calling out of California. I got another person who has been a blessing to my life, who has been mentoring me recently. And one thing I want to say about this man is anytime I've asked you for prayer, I've noticed you always say, pray for my, you don't ask for anything for yourself. You always saying, pray for my church, pray for the congregation. And over the past couple of months, man, that's something that I see and I truly respect is your heart. And I tell you this a lot, and I was even just praying about this, people that I don't know, a lot of people that go to your church or whatnot, but they are a blessing just for you just being bold to speak about stuff that a lot of people will not talk about, your heart, all that good stuff. I'm a little jealous just a little bit because I was thinking when I moved to Florida that I was going to be closer to you, but we're definitely going to link up. But I don't want to take a lot of time. I want to just get into the testimony tonight. As I told you before, as I tell other people, you can start from wherever point in your life that you want to start from. But what I just want to hear about is how were you before you got saved?
All right. Well, I was born and raised in New York City. Um, I grew up without a dad. So my mom had, my brother's dad was involved. Growing up, we went through some things. I lived in the projects, which is the hood that everybody would call it. In New York City, they call it the projects. We were poor. My mama worked 3 jobs. She went to school, played a lot of basketball. I did, in the midst of that, her husband did molest me and my sister and made me and my sister touch each other and stuff like that, some weird stuff. We were like 4 years old, 5 years old. It was kind of traumatizing. But my mom was a battered woman by the same guy. So we would have to hop from shelter to shelter. So we went from shelter to shelter. And then finally we ended up in Florida. And when we ended up in Florida, I was upset that we had to leave New York because I had scholarships on the table, but because my mama was being abused, I had to leave. So I went back to New York City to try to see if I can regain the scholarship for basketball. It did not work. I was introduced to smoking marijuana. I started smoking. Then I got back to Florida. When I got back to Florida, I just knew that there was nothing in life for me. I was like, there's no basketball no more. What am I supposed to do? I didn't even get to graduate because I got so mad that I didn't have the scholarship. So in the midst of that, I ended up finding this this dude from Florida, white kid. His name was Josh. He kind of introduced me to ecstasy at the time. If I'm 41 now, I was like 19 years old, and I didn't know nothing about acid. I didn't know nothing about no ecstasy. So he taught me how to sell it. He told me about making money and all this and that, and I started getting involved in all that. So I started selling a lot of ecstasy pills, marijuana, you name it. This was at Cape Canaveral, Florida. And then after that, I was like, man, I really don't want to do this. I want to go legit. So I ended up going to Atlanta, working for the union. I went to Atlanta for like a year. It didn't work out. I came back down. When I came back down, I saved all my money, but I ended up running into a girl. And I remember that, she kind of seduced me. We was about to have sex, and she was like, hey, do you want to snort some heroin? And I was like, oh, nah, I don't know what that is. And she was like, listen, trust me. And I'll just be real honest. She's like, hey, the sex will be better. I'm telling you, listen, it ain't gonna hurt you. Trust me. You already took ecstasy and acid before. It's okay. I took it. And from that day on, I became a junkie. I was hooked on heroin. I was hooked, for 4 or 5 years, I was a junkie. I was on heroin, cocaine, crystal meth, you name it. I used to shoot it up in my arm. Very bad. There was numerous times I OD'd. I should have died. I don't know why I didn't die. I mean, obviously we know why I didn't die because I had purpose, but at the time I OD'd a lot. And finally, one day, it was a Christmas day. I mean, it was around Christmas time. I remember I got in trouble. As a matter of fact, I ended up getting a bunch of felonies. I mean, it was crazy. I had PBLs, I had, punishable to life. I had life sentences looking at it. By the grace of God, the guy was illegal. He was from Mexico. He never showed up to court. So case was dismissed. I was looking at 25 to life. And then but I still had probation, 9 years of a robbery that was involved. There was cocaine deals and stuff. I mean, people can check my record. It's so nasty. It's a bunch of felonies. I mean, it's not there no more, but you can still find it though. And the reason why I say that is because a lot of people are like, yeah, you're talking crazy. Yeah, just look up my name and you'll check out my felonies. I don't need to talk, something that's not true. So that happens. I get on probation. No, that happens, but I never got to get on probation yet because finally I go to the store and this lady's like, hey, I don't know what you're doing, but you got way too much value to be out here doing drugs. And that stuck with me that day. And it was around Christmas time. And I called my mom. I said, hey, mom, I'm ready to come home. I want to get clean from drugs. I got to clean. I want to go to your house. Boo, boo, boo. I stayed there for a couple months. I got clean. And at that time, my mama was kind of seeking the Lord at that time too. He was like, in and out. And then finally, I find my baby moms, which is I have a child with her, which is my daughter Alexa's mom. Um, I get on probation. I got in trouble again. I was on house arrest. I got in trouble. Then I was on the run. And then from there, when I got on the run, um, I knew I had to turn myself in because I ended up having breakfast with her parents, and I was Brevard's most wanted. And it was all over the newspaper. And I was like, man, I got to turn myself in because somebody's going to turn me in. So I had to duck until I had all the money for a lawyer. Finally, I go to court. I get put on probation for 8 years. And around halfway down doing, when I first got the 8 years, 9 years, I knew I couldn't do drugs anymore, nothing like that. But I sold a lot of dope. And I ran into some people's, I was selling a lot of cocaine, a lot of heroin. I was making a lot of money on probation. And finally, when I was getting to the ending of the probation, my baby mom's goes to the military and she leaves. She leaves my daughter with me. I start selling dope, more dope, more dope. Finally, I'm selling so much dope that I can't have my daughter around because those who knows about the streets, I could be with my daughter. I could either get shot for money or dope. It's a drug war out there. Everybody would want to rob somebody or something like that. And people knew me. And I didn't want to bring her in that. You know what I'm saying? I didn't want DCF involved. So I gave her up to the mother to her grandparents. And then they took her. And then she went to the military. She cheated on me. So I left her. I was like, man, you know what? I don't need to be with you. You cheated on me, girl. Because the whole purpose was for her to go to the military to get me out the dope game. And that didn't work out. She cheated on me. She stayed out there. Finally, and it's just crazy. I don't think you even know this part. I knew that there was something up, and I knew there was a God because something told me to move out of the trap house that I was in like 3 times, and I remember being high, and I'm like, what? And so this fear came over me. So I started packing everything up. I moved out. Next day, my buddy hits me up. He says, bro, your door got kicked in and it's this bad. And I'm like, I'm not there. He's like, for real? How'd you know that? I'm like, I heard a voice told me to leave. Bro, that's a fingerprints of God. That's when I knew I was like something was off. So in the midst of that, I'm selling dope. I find my wife, which is at the time my girlfriend. I find her. She's my friend. I ended up sleeping with a bunch of females. She was like my best friend. She would call me a slut and all that. She was like, bro, you just love women doing this or that, whatever. Finally, I get an opportunity to go to the CBA and for a tryout. And I started playing in a lot of tournaments and I was getting back into shape. I even stopped smoking cigarettes. I started getting into shape. And then I played in a tournament and I shattered my wrist. And when I shattered my wrist, I went into a deep depression. And I was just like upset because I was like, I don't want to sell dope no more. This cannot be life. I don't like it. I don't care how much money I'm making, whatever the case. This is not legit. I'm not liking this. In the depression, I started going fishing and I just started asking questions, and I knew there was a God, but I was speaking to somebody at the time. I was just like, I know I'm speaking to God, but I don't know who. And I was like, man, if this is life, I don't want it. I don't want to sell dope. There has to be a purpose. Something has to give it. This ain't it. I'm not liking this. You know what I mean? So, and I started realizing that um, I would sell dope, and then I would feel bad giving the dope to the people. And I'm like, man, what's wrong with me? Like, this girl, they would come be like, hey, give me pills. I'm like, yeah, but you're spending your money on your baby's diapers, man. I can't do that. You know what I mean? Go buy diapers for your kids, whatever. It was just weird. And then even my enemies, I would see my enemies and go up to them, and I'd have my peoples, which at that time we call them goons. They used to be with me. And I used to reckon, I'd be like, yo, man, forgive me, bro, for tripping out and saying that I was gonna shoot up your house and kill you. I'm not gonna kill you, bro. I just want to say I'm sorry, man. Let's let bygones be bygones. And my people was like, man, you're crazy, bro. Like, he called the police on you. He's a rat. Da da da. Something. I knew something was different. Something was happening. Finally, I'm in this deep depression, and my wife, which is my girlfriend at the time, we were trapping out. We had a trap house, and she was like, "Man, you should call your mom." And at the time, my mama was already in for Jesus, but nobody knew at that time. My mind, I was thinking about my daughter. I'm like, man, I can't believe I abandoned my daughter. I gave her up over the streets, man. This is not cool, bro. I feel bad. I don't even feel like selling dope. The dope game is the reason why I lost my daughter. And these are the thoughts that I was having in my mind. And then my wife kept, my girl, she was like, yo, which is my wife. She's like, yo, you need to call your mom. I'm like, all right, cool. I'm gonna call my mom. And then I started having a conversation with her. Boom, boom. By the time we got to the end of the discussion, the conversation, I was hanging up. She's like, hey, listen, I want to tell you something. Jesus can bring your daughter back. And I was like, what? How'd you even know? Like, I didn't tell her. I'm like, how did she even know that I was thinking about my daughter all day in my mind? That was all that was on my mind. It was my daughter. So I'm like, all right, cool. I'll pray. I'm gonna pray. He said, you told me to pray, and he's gonna answer my prayer about my daughter. He's like, yep. And I said, all right, cool. So I go in the shower. I start crying. I'm like, man, this is crazy, Lord. Is this you talking to me? Whatever. But when you're in the world and you smoke weed again, it's like, yeah, right. God is not real. I'm just gonna prove my mama he ain't real. I'm gonna pray, Lord, if you're God that you say you are, you'll bring my daughter with me. And I remember saying this too. I totally forgot to tell you this. I said, if you are the God that you say you are, and you bring my daughter to me and she remains with me, I will serve you for the rest of my life. That's exactly what I said. That was the craziest thing I said. I was like, okay, cool. But at that time, I already knew like this is impossible. But leading to that, I just spoke to my daughter. It was like on a Monday, and then Tuesday I spoke to my mom, and I'm like, hey, yeah, she didn't know I was speaking to my daughter, and I Skyped her. And those that knows what Skype is what we're doing right now. It's a video chat. We video chat. She's like, yeah, I'm in Colorado and I'm on base, whatever, boo boo. I'm like, all right, whatever. I sent her some money. And finally I do the prayer, I cry. I At that time I was working at a job because those who did the street life knew that whenever you had money, you got pulled over and you didn't have a job, they kept your money. So I just like, yo, I gotta give me a job because if I get pulled over with all this money, the police is gonna take it, right? So I go to this maintenance place. We used to do a lot of maintenance work there. And there was a guy there. His name is Ramon. And the guy's like, he's always inviting me to church, all this and that. And at that time, I was like, hey, bro, something was telling me to go to church. So I was like, hey, bro, I want to go to your church. He's like, bro, your church is like an hour away. You could go to church right down the street or something. And I'm like, right. But I want to go to your church. Can you pick me up? And he's like, I don't think you're serious. I'm like, okay. So then how about if I gave you my wallet? Now you really got to come get me. So finally, boom, and this is crazy because I was high. I smoked before I went to church. I will remember that. I smoked weed. This is the grace of God, bro. So I'm smoking weed. He picks me up and he's like, bro, why you? I'm like, bro, I need weed. Like, what you mean? Like, I know if they judge me, they judge me. Okay, whatever. I go there. The guy's preaching the love of money. And I was like, yeah, whatever. Everybody struggles with money. It's not only me that loves money, whatever. So by that time, I was sobering up. I'm like, bro, you gotta take me to the house. I needed some weed, whatever. He's like, all right, chill, chill, bro. Could just wait, bro. You like, don't try me right now. Let me just like say bye to my peoples and I'll take you, bro. Just have some respect. I'm like, all right, bet you're right. So as I'm pacing up and down there's like this little one waiting area. Out of nowhere, this is now, I spoke to her on Monday, and then Tuesday is whenever I have the conversation with my mom. Wednesday was church. I go there, and all of a sudden I'm pacing and I hear a voice, and it starts saying daddy, daddy, daddy. And I look, and it was my daughter. And at that time, I cried. I just knew. I'm like, no, this is not happening. What is going on right now? This is not really happening. And I hugged her. I was on my knees and I was crying and crying. And she's like, are you okay, daddy? I'm like, yeah, I'm okay, baby. And in my mind, I'm like, Lord, if this is you and you could have her stay here and not go back to Colorado, I'll serve you. I said it again. Boom, the grandma comes. Hey, oh my God, you go to this church? I'm like, yeah, this is my first time today. She's like, us too. We came, we decided to come to church today, the first time. So we both anonymously decided to go to the church. And they were like, yeah, now that you're going to church and you going to church and I go to church here, and we're gonna start coming here, your daughter's staying with us. She's not going back to Colorado. And I started crying even harder. And then I went home and I was just shocked. I just couldn't believe it. I'm like, this is really happening. Oh my God, he's real. There's no way, bro. This was like in 2-day motion. He moved this fast. So now I'm at the house and I'm smoking weed though. And they invited me, but at that same day, they said, hey, you want to go to a church retreat? So when they go in the woods and stuff like that and kind of have a alone time with Jesus over there. And I'm at the house and I'm like, all right, yeah, I need to go to this thing, boom. But I was dealing with a lot of condemnation. So when I got to the retreat, I felt like I didn't fit in. I was just like, man, this is not for me. Like God doesn't love me, bro. Like I already shot at people, a pistol whip, rob, people I sold dope, they OD'd and died. Like, God, you're crazy. There's no way they could save me. Like, you don't understand the evil things I've done. And, at that time, I didn't know that God was all knowing. You know what I'm saying? I just didn't know that. So I'm like, no, no. But this was all in my head. And I'm in the woods. Nobody's around. I'm walking in the woods and I'm in my head. I'm like, oh my God, I don't even need to be here. I'm not trying to be here, bro. I gotta go because God does not love me, bro. Like I'm wicked. And a guy just hops out of nowhere. He jumps out right out the bushes. And I'm like, what's up? He's like, hey, listen, those thoughts you're having that you're condemning yourself, like he can't forgive you for the wicked things you did? He can. The blood is sufficient. And I'm like, what are you talking about? How do you even know what I'm thinking in my head? Like, this is crazy right now. The Lord is telling me right now, bro. Listen, I remember too, he told me, he said, I think it was a serial killer. He's like, I was in prison, bro, and God forgave this serial killer. And I was like, what? I want to say Dama. I could be wrong though. I don't remember, but it was one of those serial killers. He's like, oh, he got saved, whatever. And I'm like, what? It's crazy. I'm like, and he's word for word saying what my mind was saying. Like, I gave dope, they OD. He's like, it don't matter the people you gave the dope to and they OD. I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. Finally, he leaves. He's like, I'll leave you alone, but just remember what I'm telling you. Jesus wants to take that burden. And I'm like, okay. Boom. I run. I go to the base. Like I'm not, it's not the base. It's like you go in the woods, but now you're in the camp where there's the campfire and the guy's preaching the gospel, like Jesus is this, Jesus this and that, he died for this. And I'm like, oh my God. So I go back in the woods. I'm like, oh my God. So like, because at that time I'm prideful. I'm not gonna do that out in the open. I go in the thing, I'm like, Lord, I just receive you, Jesus. Everything. I want to live for you. Teach me. I don't care what you got to do. I now know you lifting this burden up. I know what you did for me. I'm ready. But then I heard a voice, which I know at the time was the Holy Spirit. He's like, get baptized. And I'm like, oh my God. And I'm running around, I'm like, yo, baptism, what is that? Like, I need that right now. Like, and they were like, oh, we're having baptism tonight. You want to go? I'm like, oh, cool. And I remember my best friend was there, like my closest friend. He was there. He got baptized with me and stuff because I brought him with me and stuff like that. And from there on, bro, that was the whole journey of Jesus. You know what I'm saying? That from that day on, it was no turning back. It was just like I'm all in. Like, and it was crazy because I remember too, like that night after I got baptized, that's what was the preaching. It was a guy talking about poker, and he said it's all in or nothing, or you bluffing. One of the two you doing. And if you going all in, it's because you got a strong hand. And he preached that, and I was like, oh my God, that's what I said. I'm gonna be all in. And so, and that was all he wrote. Like once he did that, I was like, oh man, I know you're God, bro. Like there's no. And once like I got baptized, I remember too, it was 40, 30 degrees out. When I came up that water, I was sweating. I was on fire. I couldn't believe what was happening to me. I'm like, what is this? Like, and I'm a person, I get high. I'm like, this is a different high right now. And I was tripping out. Everybody's like, bro, I could see it. I'm like, I'm on fire, bro. Doesn't make sense right here. It's like 40, 35 degrees and I'm really sweating right now, So, but yeah, that's pretty much it. Like from there on, I mean, obviously there's numerous testimonies along the ways,
You
but
had
that's
told
the
me about
starter.
one. You had told me about a time when someone had called you and they knew a situation about your daughter and you didn't even tell them. Talk about that. Because I think you
Oh,
were, I don't know exactly. I forgot how you had said it, but you had a situation going on with your daughter, but I think somebody had called you or they had spoke to you and they knew exactly what was going on. And I
well,
think
that was
they,
my mom. That was the one I was telling you about. That's when I was thinking of things about my daughter, and I was just like, doo doo. And then when I called my mom, and I haven't talked to her in forever, she word for word was saying, "Hey, that what you feeling right now, this and that, he could bring her back to you." And then I was like, oh my God, how did you even know that? Like, how could you possibly be know? And I would like, and at the time I lied to my mother, like, oh, everything me and my daughter's good. And I didn't want to like express things because I knew that the minute I do that, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. So I try to keep it simple. And so, but she went into details of everything I was feeling about my daughter. And she's like, Jesus is the only one that could bring her back. And I'm like, what? And that was like the whole trigger of that, you know what I'm saying? So, but yeah,
okay,
that's
so now fast forward, like what have you, I know you're a pastor now. I know you're doing deliverance, you're doing all kinds of stuff, but what was your life like right? What I put it like this, what was your walk like with Christ? Because everybody is different. Some people never look back. Me, I was struggling for a long time.
yeah, me too.
It took me a minute to get, I wasn't one of those people. Let me ask you this. When it came to your drug addiction and stuff like that, did that just go just like that, or what was it a process? What was your process
Okay.
like?
Okay. So at that time when I got saved, I was popping pills because I was selling them. So it was weird because I was taking a lot of them. Like, because remember, you got to understand, I was in a depressed state. So when the situation with Jesus happened, I'm not even joking. The smoking of the weed and the pills stopped, and I didn't even get sick. I was just so on fire, right? But and at that time, I remember too, like I went home. When I got back and I came home, I took all the pills and flushed them. That my mom, I mean my wife was pissed. What are you talking about? We got bills to pay. You tripping with this Jesus stuff? And she was freaking out. But so that happens. But I did go back to and I backslid it like 3 times. And I ain't gonna lie. Um, Number one was lack of, you know, discipleship. That's the truth. That's not no lie. So I read the Bible and I knew a lot about it and I read it. I didn't know about the spiritual realm. I thought it was just Jesus and this and that. And I'm Gucci and I'm good. But what was happening to me, this is real, man, because this will relate a lot to people. At the time, my wife, she was still in the world. She believed in Jesus, but was doing her thing. So when I came to Jesus, she was pretty much not wanting to do nothing with me. Yes, I verbally abused her. Yes, I devalued her and all that. But then I got scared because I'm like, well, man, she's not attracted to me no more. She's not this, she's not that. Maybe if I get high with her again and get drunk and thought like I could do that and then pull her out of that, it just kept me bombed. Boom. And then one time, that was the first time was I did that on the DL. I used to go to church and lie and like, oh yeah, we smoke at nighttime, 10 o'clock, nobody knows, dude. And I go, even with my wife, we were front. It was all a fake, a fraud. And the most powerful thing is that my mama come through the door, knocks on the door. It's like 10:30 at night. She knocks on the door, and I'm like, oh my God, it's my mama, bro. In my eyes, boom, Visine it, boom. I was like, okay, cool. She's like, hey, I got a prophet in the phone. She wants to talk to you. And I was like, all right, cool. Let me see. I go in the room and talk to her. And the prophet told me, he's like, hey, I just want to let you know that the Lord told me to tell you, you cannot hide the pills and the weed that you're smoking. He
Mm,
can
mm,
see
mm.
what you're doing. And then the fear of the Lord hit me. I got scared. I'm like, oh my God. I like legit went sober quick. I was like, what? He's like, and he's telling you that he's explaining this to you. You cannot hide from him and you will do his will. And I'm like, all right, oh my God. And I freaked out. So my wife, she's like, oh my God, this is crazy. What's happening? I'm like, yeah, whatever. So at that time, then we try to move again, and then we stop. Then doo we go over there. Something happens again with me and my wife. It wasn't going through it. Well, I fell again, and I got into the weed. I'm like, oh man, and stuff like that. This time it was different because God let me stay in bondage, and He allowed me to see myself in bondage and letting me know, get yourself out of that. And He let me know, get yourself out of that. And I couldn't. I was fasting, praying. I'm like, I can't get myself. I'm bound, Lord. This and this and that. Finally, I think I did a prayer and I said, Lord, remove everything in the way of me growing and getting closer to you and becoming more like you, Jesus. So, and then that was the last time, but God took everything. He took my wife, He took the business, because at the time, the business, I still have it, but we took a big loss on the business, and I lost my house, and I was sleeping on my mama's couch. But that was the greatest encounters of Jesus I've ever had in my life. Like, that changed everything. And that's when I started understanding deliverance, because I was, when that happened, God told me, I need you to fast. And when I started fasting, I started seeing the evil side of, like, there was some evil things that were coming out of me, like anger, rage, lust, perversion, like very high levels of it. And I was just like, oh my God, this is insane. What's happening to me? But before that, I did a deliverance with my mother, so I knew, like, off the gate, that Christians can have demons. But when I brought it up with the church I was going to, they say you're crazy because that's not true. And I was like, how? The girl that serves at your church, my mama casted the devil out of her. So unless she was lying and you got her, and so it was a confusion. But when that started happening, I started getting delivered. And the more I got delivered, the more I felt the peace of God. I started having more control. And that's to encourage people. It's not to give you the okay to say, well, it's okay to backslide. I'm okay. No. Every time I fell, it was like the first time I fell, I disliked it. The second time I did it, I was disgusted by it. The last time I did it, I hated it. And I'm like, I'm not staying here. I know this more. This is crazy and it's an addiction. I can't be around this. I don't want this. I don't know if it's an idol. I don't know what you got to do, God. Figure out how I can get out of this, because this doesn't make sense. Your word don't match of how I'm supposed to be living, right? And then that's when I started understanding, the power of the Holy Spirit. My wife left. At that time, I was just reading the scriptures. I had to unlearn a lot of things from the church I was going to, because they didn't believe in deliverance. So I had to relearn the gospel all over. Then I fell in love with the gospel. Then I started getting delivered. And finally, when I got delivered, it was all gone. I mean, even from pornography, there's other stuff that I was struggling with and stuff like that. But deliverance was the thing that kind of kept, like, that kind of launched everything. Like, I was like, oh man, you know what I mean? And even with that, you still got to maintain your deliverance, you know what I'm saying? So,
So
but that I tell the
talk
people.
about that, because I mean, you're a person that I can ask questions to, because a lot of people be asking me a bunch of questions, but I be hitting you with all kinds of stuff. And you have a lot of wisdom, and I know wisdom a lot of times comes from pain. A lot of times people want to know things, but it comes from their experiences. So what have your experiences been like with the demonic, because I know you had to be a target where you just come up under heavy attack before you got to where you were. So what have
Right.
your experiences been like when it comes to the types of stuff that you had to deal with?
Right. Okay. So the first one was, I had to deal with me. So that's what fasting is. Isaiah 58 says it pulls out the wickedness of you. It takes out the nasty you, right? So as soon as I started getting delivered in those areas, I was just like, man, this is powerful. Where's this freedom coming from? Whatever. And at that time, my wife came back. Finally, she comes back. She's just like, I don't know what I was thinking. But at that time, I've already removed her as my idol. So when she came back, I was like, hey, I'm just gonna be honest. It's Jesus or nothing. If you're not gonna be for me, because I'm all the way with Jesus. If it's gonna stir conflict where you're just like, I don't want Jesus, and then it's better that you just live on your own and start a whole new life somewhere else. Because And I was just being honest because I'm like, we already separated. I mean, we've been separated for a minute. And she was like, no, no, God has been talking to me too. I have to be with you. It is you. I had dreams and da, da. So once that started happening, then um, I got baptized in the Holy Spirit. Then that was a whole different thing. And I'm just like, okay, what is this? I remember jumping out the shower and I got baptized in the Holy Spirit, speaking in tongues and all this and that. And I was just like, whoa, this is intense. Like, what is this? And then, wisdom and understanding, God started bringing it to me. And when I really started understanding the demonic forces and the demonic realm of that we're not able to see, was I was going to a church that God led me to, and it was a church filled with witches and warlocks. At the time, I'm just like, okay, God, you want me here, boom, not a problem. My friends were going there, whatever. Um, but I think after like, I think it was 5 months, then God decided to take the veil from my eyes and said, hey, boom, these guys are witches and warlocks. We find out they were doing rituals and all that. I had people call me and say, hey, yes, he is. We want Jesus, whatever the case may be. Long story short, I was in there. God allowed me to be there to understand the deception of witchcraft and the demonic realm, like to know about lust, perversion, the marine spirits and all these crazy, wicked things, right? So then I understood that part of the witchcraft stuff. When it all started taking place was when I was just being tossed in prayer. Like I would just pray for people. And then it was like, what's happening? And then the demon will talk. And I'm like, oh my God, this is deliverance. And and I remember because this is how I knew about the deliverance, because in the church of the witches and warlocks, what was happening was they were using us, which we were real men of God, that we were using us as vessels to do deliverances. And that's what was the red flag for me. I'm like, why am I doing deliverance and you're the pastor? Something's off, right? So me and we were like, huh, this is like a red flag for me. And then after that, God told me, remove yourself from there. Boom. I preached against them. And it's like, hey, you a witch and warlock, you guys are deceivers. I remember preaching this thing called deceivers preaching deception, trying to manipulate people, and you're the ones that's manipulating. So once that started happening, I started understanding, demons now. It's like, okay, these are the demons. And then when I started doing heavy deliverances, I started understanding ancestors' curse, generational curses. Then I started understanding principalities. Then I started understanding witches and warlocks, that they are real. They are the ones that, keep the church bound. And once I started understanding these things, that's when I had to obviously upgrade my prayer life, my fasting life, and being alert and discern. And I remember that God said, you're not trending like the rest of the church world. You're not doing that. I'm gonna pull you out, because at least when you're pulling out, you can see from the outside in and see how the church is so jacked up because of lack of deliverance. And then that after that, that's when God was just taking the revelations and the scriptures of things like, look, this is the marine spirit, this does this, and this does that. But as you're doing deliverances, believe it or not, demons talk crazy out of people. They'll come up, even witches and warlocks, they'll astral project out of you, and they start ratting on each other. And in the ratting each other out, they give out information that makes sense. It's like, oh, I see what you're talking about. So you're the one that been robbing the dreams. Yes. Okay. Boom. So then you start learning these things, and as I'm doing it, I'm taking notes. So it's like, okay, this is how you're doing it. All right, not a problem. And so that's when it all started shifting, is whenever, because now it makes sense of why God's people are bound. So that's where it's like, you leave Egypt, but you can't get Egypt out of you.
Mm.
Why? Because you have demons. You know what I'm saying? So in the midst of you being saved, that's what happened to me. That's why I learned so much. It was like 5 years of error, false doctrine, doctrines of demons, just stuff that was not true. I made, God allowed me to go through that. That's how I gained wisdom, through pain, through errors, through mistakes. And I would write them down. Nope, this is not the truth. This is the truth. This produces results and stuff. And that's how I started understanding more of the demonic realm of why we have a church and we only have one leader and everybody else is in the pews. which in reality, that's a red flag in itself, because everybody is ordained to something in the body of Christ. So then once deliverance came, then everybody's gift was manifesting the love of God. You know what I'm saying? And one of the main things that I teach a lot is unforgiveness. If you have unforgiveness, you're bound. That's worse than an addiction. You know what I'm saying? It's like one of the worst things that I tell people is like, hey, I'd rather you have the spirit of addiction, because we could cast that joker out. But if you have unforgiveness, I can't cast that out, because it's a decision. And if it's a decision, then you don't know what Jesus did for you. What you're saying is that the cross is not enough for the unforgiveness. It's not valid. It's not sufficient. So, but yeah, I got into that because of myself, and I started studying myself. Like, why did I get angry? Oh, that was the anger of the anger spirit. Okay, this, and then after that happened, then I delivered my wife, and then I started studying my wife, asking her questions like, how did you feel when this came out? And she was like, yeah, and I would take notes. Okay, that makes sense. And that's what makes us our love become unconditional, because a lot of it has to do with demonic oppression, and that's the demonization. Is like some of us take the attack personal, but most of those attacks are really from the demons. People would be like, hey, Will, you crazy? No, I'm not crazy, because I study my wife, I study myself, and I study friends. And they tell me the same thing. I would black out, and I would be like, why am I doing this? And I would cry and be like, oh, I don't want this, Lord. So, but yeah, man, I've been on this journey, and I now understand the spiritual realm.
All right. So I was gonna ask you, there's something I want to ask you, man, because a lot of times, truth be told, when I'm interviewing people, I know the answers to the questions. But with you, it's just you got a lot of knowledge and wisdom and stuff that I just want to pick your brain and just know for myself. But we're about out of time, so I'm gonna have to bring you back on, because you open up a lot of nuggets, man. But for people that may see this in the Florida area, could you talk about their church? Like, how can they find you? Like, I know you do stuff on Facebook, but then you actually have a church. So, like, can you talk about where your church is located?
Um,
Got 1 minute.
we are. If you check me out on Wilkins Gonzalez, obviously on Facebook, we're called Christ Glorified Ministries. We're out of Palm Bay, off of Palm Bay Road, on Claremont. I think it's 1240 Claremont Street. And that is, I call it, it's Christ Glorified Ministries. We focus on giving God glory, um, and we build leaders. And I'll be real with it. God is calling me into this apostolic call in building leaders to grow other leaders. Not only that, but to pull out the potential of people that have been bound for years. That yes, we there's a lot to put work into it, but if you don't have leaders that have love and compassion and endurance, it's going to be hard to build leaders. So we're there building leaders. You know what I'm saying? So that's what we're about, and you guys can go there. We do a lot of deliverances, but that's what we on right now, man. Is building a lot of, you know what I mean? So, but yeah, and
All
it's all
right,
over
so we're about to
ministry.
run out of town, man. But I would like to do a part two, if that's cool with you, because I got a
Oh,
lot
that's
of more
cool. Yeah,
stuff to answer.
yeah.
Okay, so we're
Yeah.
about to run out. We're gonna catch y'all in the next video.